Welcome back to Dreamseed VR. I'm your host, Sarah Finn, and this is the Solarpunk episode. At this point, we're ditching numbers. It doesn't matter anymore. I know it's been a number of months, and I'm grateful you're here with me again. I hope you are not enjoying the Cyberpunk dystopia, because I know I'm not, and maybe we can be on the same page. But today's episode is really special. I've taken way too long to craft it, but I also decided that fuck a script. We're just going to roll. Pardon any buzzes my phone might make. So by now, if you've seen some of our other content, you probably already know what cyberpunk is. It's a science fiction genre that focuses on low life, high tech, with an emphasis on, the internet, electronic shit, cybernetics, androids, whatever, international corporations that are corrupt. And unfortunately, it looks like we found ourselves in a real-life cyberpunk dystopia. So what are we going to do about it? Well, if you haven't noticed, science fiction is incredibly powerful. It has the ability to shape society. All the way back from the 50s, if you look at shows like Star Trek, nowadays we get to enjoy a lot of technologies that look remarkably similar to things that were considered fantasy. So in that vein, let's explore another version of blank punk, and that would be solarpunk. What the fuck is solarpunk? Solarpunk is a relatively new science fiction genre that actually subverts the idea of a artificial technological society. And it's a return to the pastoral, a return to sustainable modes of culture, whether that's agriculture or biotech. I have pulled up a little bit of the definition from Wikipedia, give you a more official version. Solarpunk is a genre similar to steampunk that encourages optimistic envisioning of the future in light of present environmental concerns, such as climate change and pollution, as well as social inequality. Coined in 2001 by a blog, Solarpunk encompasses a multitude of media such as literature, art, architecture, fashion, music, and games. Solarpunk focuses on renewable energies such as solar and wind power, as well as technology as a whole to envision a positive future for humanity, although it embraces less advanced ways to reduce carbon emissions like gardening. Solarpunk is also a genre of speculative fiction. Some of its most well-known examples are Solarpunk, Ecological and Fantastic Stories in a Sustainable World, and Sunvault, Stories of Solarpunk and Eco-Speculation. Pardon my goofy presentation. I'm going to do as little editing as possible because I really just want to get the content out to you guys. So from here on out, you might notice that there is a little bit more roughness to the edges of my production. But in the end, I hope that it brings you more content, brings us together, lets you see a little window into my humanity, that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, let me grab my cute little script and check out what else I wanted to tell you about. So if we're going to look at the duality of cyberpunk and solarpunk, it helps to look at the aesthetics that represent these two genres. We'll start with cyberpunk since we're already a little bit familiar with it. So if you look at the aesthetic of cyberpunk, you'll often find elements of film noir. Film noir is a genre from the 30s and 40s that has a very high contrast aesthetic. It focuses on crime thrillers, that sort of thing. And some of the other things you notice in cyberpunk is that there's often an inner city or urban environment to the stories that take place. Oftentimes those urban environments are slowly degrading. It kind of focuses on the failures of unregulated capitalist society. I put a focus on unregulated. All systems have their pros and cons, but it's important to understand that capitalism does exist with regulations, just like, potentially communism could exist without authoritarianism. But here at Dreamseed, we don't stand in dualistic camps. We do make commentary on dualistic features, but for the sake of fostering conversations that actually create potential solutions, we're not here to focus on fucking politics. We're here to focus on practical shit. So one of the things that I've noticed about the nature of narrative and storytelling is that it focuses on a setup, a conflict, and a resolution. This is often called the backbone or spine of a screenplay in filmmaking. You have your setup, you learn about your characters, who they are, what they do, what's going on, and then you have your conflict. That conflict sets up a series of events that your protagonist has to then cope with in order to come to the resolution, which tends to be the climax of the film and into the, prologue. Epilogue. All right, so why do we retell stories even when the circumstances change? Oftentimes it's because our mythical storytellings hinge on this structure of setup, conflict, resolution. Now, if we're constantly in a state of rehashing our stories along those lines, you'll notice that there often aren't very many utopian stories because there's no conflict. Where's the story if everybody's happy and getting along and kumbaya, right? Typically, it's about the progress to that point, and that's where a lot of the storytelling ends, with our protagonist and all of their supporting characters holding hands, walking into the sunset. Well, Solarpunk is an interesting genre because rather than focusing on conflict, it focuses on resolution. It focuses on how do we get from where we are now to a utopian society utilizing sustainable sources for culture. Now, a lot of the aesthetic that we mentioned for Cyberpunk is gritty, dark, noir, edgy, technological, blah, blah, blah. The subversion of that, Solarpunk, tends to focus on styles that are kind of like Art Nouveau. They're curvilinear, they're floral, they're organic, like Alphonse Mucha meets some tech, right? Some cool examples include a book by, I think her name is Starhawk. It's called The Fifth Sacred Thing. Like I said, it's a pastoral return focusing on eco-remediation and cooperatives. It also highlights things like biomimicry and permaculture and designs around nature. You can see some of Paul Laffoley's work. He was a cool psychedelic magical illustrator, and a lot of his works focus on sustainable design, utilizing integration with nature. Let's see, so some of the cool mixed environs that you see in solarpunk culture as we move from an unsustainable technological society to an eco-remediated society include things like urban rooftop gardens, or solar farms, stuff like that. So some of the cyberpunk derivatives that are in this family of genres related to solarpunk include biopunk and dieselpunk. Biopunk being synthetic technology, and dieselpunk being a sort of interpretation of the interwar period of 50s retro-futuristic stuff. So these genres are heavily influenced by the effects of the nostalgia cycle that I talked about in previous episodes. And then there's also a really interesting subgenre called nanopunk, which is really exemplified by Neil Stephenson's Diamond Age. So for those of you who might know about Snow Crash, Diamond Age is another one of his novels that takes place even further into the future after a nanotechnological revolution has happened. The interesting thing, though, is you would think once we have the ability to compile matter that, maybe we would transcend some of these political systems that, create bifurcations and hierarchy between people. But no, you'd be wrong. Those problems follow us into the future. I personally haven't finished Diamond Age yet. I'm about halfway through. Ironically, it is a book I've been told that sounds a lot like my life. And I'm now obligated to read it, even though it's taken me a number of years to get to the audiobook. I'll report back what I think of it. Apparently, I am that chick with the primer. Welcome to my primer, otherwise known as Dreamseed VR. But, yeah, I feel like that's a cool little basis for an understanding of solarpunk. So now that we have an understanding of solarpunk, goosebumps, you guys, goosebumps. How do we apply this to now? They're powerful. They're still going. Ooh, makes the green screen edge fuzzy like my hair. So, we often see science fiction influence reality. And we're in a situation now where um, biotechnology has become the forefront of our development. We're dealing with a medical biotech emergency. Lots of people have varying opinions about the origin of that emergency, as we, kind of hinted at in previous episodes. But that aside, that is the conflict. And now we're at the point of resolution. Do we want a cyberpunk resolution or do we want a solarpunk resolution? Gonna make me fucking verklempt, you guys. How do we do this? We're already seeing it. When we had disruptions in the food supply and the production chain a number of months ago, a lot of people decided to start creating victory gardens. Victory gardens are something that were really relevant during the Great Depression. A lot of people didn't have the means to go to the grocery store and hand over ducats to get their calories. And so they sort of made like a homey return to gardening and that kind of DIY mentality. So that is a perfect example of how we're seeing the real world application of solarpunk ideologies and problem solving sets in the real world. You also see it with solar technology. You also see it with people creating cooperatives, creating like seed libraries, and sharing technology and techniques through decentralized communication networks. Gosh, where do we go from here? Information is power. It gives us the ability to subvert control systems that would only give us a limited number of options for how to address our problems. And at this point, we've realized that the things that were super convenient about modern society are actually the Achilles heel. Because we were able to travel around the world in a number of hours without any kind of, thresholds temporally, microbes and viral RNA have made us extremely vulnerable because of our progress. And so we need to look back to nature and biomimicry as a means of adopting techniques that will protect us from those vulnerabilities that our progress has created in the system. So re-engineering systems, reverse engineering systems, as well as cooperative exchanges of energy and information to restructure it. Like, you can't rebuild something unless you have a couple different prototypes for how you want to augment the system, right? And the best way to do that is to ask your neighbor, what works for you in our region? Because all of these regions are vastly different. My victory garden in California might be different from yours in Colorado. It might be different from theirs in Florida or Washington, And so having a focus on the cycles of time in nature rather than the artificial cycles of time that humanity have sort of imposed upon the world is a real emphasis here. So I feel like that's a decent place to leave it off. I don't want to bore you guys with too much information. I hope you've enjoyed this cool garden as my green screen background. This is actually a garden that I made about a year and a half ago in tilt brush. It features 35 different species of real world flower. And if you're interested in having access to this model, whether you'd like to share it with your community in some kind of virtual reality installation or just check it out for yourself, feel free to shoot me a message and I can Google Drive you the tilt file. Unfortunately, it's a little big for Poly, considering how realistic it is. But I hope you enjoyed this latest episode and our new studio setup with the cool green screen. Let me know if you like this style of video that's a little bit more candid and less edited. And if you like the content, please subscribe, share it with your friends, leave me a little comment. I read them all. And please check out our website at dreamseedvr.com. I know I've been slow on updating it. Thank you for your patience. But now that we've sort of broken the crest of this second wave of content this year. I hope to keep the ball rolling. So check us out on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Seraphin. And yeah, be well, be smart, educate yourself, reach out to the others. And if you're brave, trip balls. I love you guys. Till next time.